does Russia continue to bury its head in the sand to the deteriorating situation in the south and continue to attack near Bakhmut? Plus, did no one learn the lesson from Prigozhin, and is Putin having even more influencers rise up against him? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's November 20th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first taking a look at the control map. The only notable change is north of Klachivka here. You can see Russian forces continuing to surge north of the town. And while this has taking Klachivka has been considerably difficult for Ukrainian forces, and retaking it also difficult for Russian forces, you can see that they're advancing, but they're advancing into these forested areas north of Klachivka. As discussed, I think the number one place they would want to roll back would be these forest strips along the rail line to the east of the town. Now, advancing towards the northern flank of the town is certainly advantageous to Russia if their goal is to retake Klachivka, but it doesn't necessarily, again, this looks to me like target of opportunity. The only one that I think is substantial is this here, this forested area where they've driven the Ukrainians out. But again, to me, this is not a Ukrainian priority, and I think the Ukrainians realize that this isn't going to be a part of a major breakthrough. And it's not clear that this effort will necessarily allow Russia to retake Klachivka. You can see the town itself is in low ground, and there's high ground up here to the north. So I think that maybe what Russia is actually trying to push into is seize along this northern ridgeline so they can gain superiority over the heights of Klachivka and then force the Ukrainians out from this low ground. So that may be the strategy. But again, if that's the strategy, then why are they attacking here in the north? There's just something broken about Russian command right now that I can't quite put my finger on. Again, I think the theory that that individual commands are trying to make good on gains that they have effectively promised the Kremlin through overly optimistic mapping, or possibly they are simply trying to take territory for territory's sake and just sort of seizing terrain regardless of whether it serves a larger operational objective or not. I think either theory is credible. What I want to point out is that despite Ukraine confirming their operations in and around the right bank of Kherson, the southern bank of the Dnipro, we're not seeing any updates on these maps yet. And that's because Ukraine hasn't confirmed any official positions that they've held, right? They've only made vague statements about there being bridgeheads. And open source sources are the ones who are identifying places like Puima, Prishchanivka, Krinky as being bridgeheads that are expanding. But until there's official confirmation, these are probably going to remain unupdated and unmarked. Looking over at the combat map, you can see Russian forces, again, appear to be concentrating their offensive efforts in eastern Ukraine and are virtually ignoring this Kherson region. It's almost like the two sides are fighting past each other, if that makes any sense. Where Russian forces are committed to trying to take Avdiivka still, right? They can't stomach the idea, the humiliation that their MOD has been unable to take any town of any substance. And so they continue to throw men and material into this. They continue to throw men and material into Klachivka in an effort to retake it. But it largely ignore the deteriorating situation in Kherson, where Ukraine in turn doesn't seem to be particularly focused on retaking any of the territory in this eastern part of the country. They're happy to allow Russian forces to come out of their holes, expose themselves, and take massive casualties, even if it means giving up some gains in exchange. If that means that Ukrainian forces are able to operate with even less opposition in the Kherson region. So I think this is a classic case of the two sides kind of fighting past each other, with Russian forces trying to push westward and Ukrainian forces trying to push south. Now, if you guys are interested in supporting a veteran-owned business, you should check out Strike Gum. Strike Gum, of course, inspired by my time in Afghanistan when I would go on long combat patrols. I had to take these, if I needed caffeine, I had to take these incredibly gross energy drinks called Rippets. But like every energy drink, they were carbonated, so they made you feel bloated and gross. They were loaded with sugar, which is just terrible for you. You can literally see in my deployment photos that I gained like 15 pounds from when I arrived in country to when I left because I ate so much sugar. I consumed so much sugar. So they're loaded with sugar, and of course they taste gross. If you've ever had the experience of drinking an energy drink at 115-degree heat, it's absolutely disgusting. And when I got back to the States and I wanted a Red Bull, it was like $4.50. It's crazy expensive. So to solve all those problems, I created Strike Gum. It's made right here in the USA, obviously a veteran-owned company. You can see right there, 0 sugar. There's only like 5 calories per piece. It has, each one of these individual pieces has 90 milligrams of caffeine. That's more caffeine than a Red Bull or an Amp Energy. Plus we have 100 milligrams of alpha GPC for improved cognition and focus. And best of all, right, it's a refreshing mint flavor, and 50% of the proceeds from this first production run, I'm donating to charities that support Ukrainian civilians who've been injured or displaced in the conflict. So check us out, strikegum.com. We have had literally 1 in 5 people that have purchased a pack have come back and purchased a tray. So that should tell you everything you need to know right there about the quality of this energy gum. And if you're interested, of course, a tray, 75 pieces of gum, the equivalent of 75 energy drinks, is only $69.99, which works out to like 68 cents a piece. So if you have an expensive energy drink habit, this is a great way to this is a great alternative. So check us out, strikegum.com. Okay, now here's what I really wanted to talk about. This is Igor Girkin. Now you might recall Igor Girkin is in prison. And not only that, but he is a former Russian intelligence officer. He served with the FSB in places like Bosnia-Herzegovina, or the late former Bosnia, the former Yugoslavia, and Chechnya, right? He's a high-level FSB, KGB figure, who then became a mill blogger, a military influencer, not unlike yours truly. But unlike yours truly, his ego unlike yours truly, he's in a country where you can't offer independent analysis of anything. And so he ended up in prison. And he is still tweeting from prison, writing letters to his wife, who's then publishing those letters in his tweets. And Telegram posts, but Girkin has announced he's going to run for Russian president, despite being literally in jail. He learned obviously nothing from Wagner and nothing from Prigozhin's fate. Girkin, right, said that he's better than Vladimir Putin, which is probably true at this point. And Girkin said that the current Russian government fears his nomination because it would disrupt the Kremlin's plans to have sham candidates run against Putin. As he says, quote, Putin is, quote, the only winner of the presidential election already known in advance. Girkin acknowledged that running in the Russian presidential election is, quote, like sitting down at a table to play with cheaters, but bringing like-minded patriots, that's his term for his supporters, together through the election is a defeat for the Russian officials living on the delusional, quote, planet of the pink ponies. Is Girkin accusing Putin of being a brony? Weird. Girkin also, of course, appealed to many of the other Russian sort of independent parties who've supported him, right? His crime, of course, is discrediting the Russian military by criticizing the MOD's tactics, which obviously are basically terrible. And the fact that this is even happening is absolutely fascinating. Girkin, of course, maintains ties with many of Russia's veterans who support his release, which, again, is probably worrying to the Russian MOD simply because the Wagner group, right, made up of a relatively small number of armed veterans, were able to march on Moscow unopposed. And I think Prigozhin blinked as he got to the gates of Moscow, but I think he probably did so inappropriately. I think he could have really held the city of Moscow hostage and negotiated a deal that would have, not resulted in him being KIA. So the thing to take away from this is that Putin sent the strongest message possible to his opposition figures by taking out Prigozhin. He said, if you try you will fail. And I will ensure it, and I will eliminate you. And Gherkin, despite seeing this, despite being fully aware of it, is still so mad and so despondent at how the war is being run that he also wants to come at Putin, which is crazy, which is absolutely crazy to me. But it's a sign. I think it's a symbol of the fact that, troublingly for Putin, Russia's cosmopolitan, as liberal as you can get in Russia, liberals don't support the war in any way. Hundreds of thousands of Russians have fled to countries like Kazakhstan and Thailand and are trying to sit out this conflict. They hate Putin. Now, the ultra-nationalist community, right? The militant veterans, the Russian super nationalists, they are starting to hate Putin in the MOD, which means that who is left to support the president? The answer is virtually nobody. And the fact that these guys are coming out of the woodwork to oppose him is itself a sign of the instability and weakness of the Putin regime. And that's not hype, right? You guys know I don't just I call a spade on this channel. But that's a bad sign, guys. That's a bad sign, right? Putin really needed his strong arm with Prigozhin to send a message, and the fact that message hasn't landed should have him sweating. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Thank you so much to our Colonel tier members. Thanks to our Lieutenant tier members. I really couldn't do this without you guys, the members of combatvetnews.com, getting those twice weekly uncensored combat video breakdowns that I just can't do here on YouTube. You guys are the ones who allow me to do this. I appreciate you so much, and be sure to hit like and subscribe. See you in the next one.